discover the incredible reason a billionaire found his maid's daughter washing dishes at 3 a.m. Robert Langston had everything: money, status, respect, but part of him felt hollow as he navigated the opulent halls of his estate. After a dazzling charity gala that showcased the wealth of his elite peers, he returned home burdened by the weight of their judgments. That's when he heard it. The unmistakable clatter of dishes resonating through the granite walls at 3 a.m. Curiosity piqued. He followed the sound, each footfall echoing with unsettling anticipation. Entering the kitchen, he was met with an image that seared into his memory. Maria, the teenage daughter of his maid, scrubbing pots and pans with fervor. Her wide eyes met his, surprise morphing quickly into fear, and Robert's mind raced. Here was a young girl, fighting against the grasp of despair, yet completely invisible to the world outside. He felt a pang deep within. It was a mirrored reflection of his own childhood, when survival meant every penny counted. Every meal was a battle. "Mr. Langston," she stammered, her gaze dropping to the sudsy water. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." Robert waved off her apology, heart pounding with an intensity that seemed almost out of place in his luxurious life. The desperation in her voice struck a nerve. Maria's mother was sick, the mounting medical bills suffocating them, shrouding their lives in darkness. He could almost feel his pulse matching the frantic rhythm of her scrubbing. What he wanted to do, what he felt he needed to do, was help. Yet, he was acutely aware of the stakes involved. Associating with her family meant stirring the quiet waters of privilege. The thought of his peers mocking him, whispering behind closed doors about his unusual involvement with someone in a lower social class, sparked a conflict within him, rippling through his carefully constructed world. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the pull of his past swirling within him, Robert wrestled with his better instincts. Was he prepared to confront the very classism he once escaped? As he stood there, the tension wrapped around him like a vice, thoughts screaming about the potential fallout. What if his company's major investor withdrew his support? What if he lost everything? As he contemplated his next move, an idea sparked to life. Why not help Maria publicly? A competition, an opportunity for her talent to shine. But every plan came with risk. Did he have the courage to challenge the thorny vines of social prejudice that ensnared his world? The day of the competition approached, and every minute spent watching Maria train deepened his resolve. Robert's admiration for her determination was only matched by his growing anxiety. Could he truly shift perceptions that seemed set in stone among his elite circle? Could he risk it all for the sake of an innocent girl, but in doing so, threaten everything he had built? Standing backstage, he caught Maria's eye. An exchange passed between them, laden with unspoken fears and hopes. Just before they took the stage, Robert paused. The uncertainty ahead loomed like a dark storm, revealing his gnawing doubt that this journey might lead them both into uncharted territory. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown to the moment where they would have to confront their fates. Would he prove that character could indeed transcend class divides? The spotlight burned bright, casting a harsh glare on Robert as he moved to the front of the stage. The cacophony of whispers and hushed conversations from the audience faded into an indistinct hum. All that mattered was Maria, standing beside him, trembling with anticipation, yet ready to reclaim her narrative. He inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of an entire room's judgment pressing on his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice quaking slightly, "tonight, we celebrate not just talent, but the indomitable spirit of perseverance. Each word felt like an act of defiance against the tidal wave of societal expectations. Maria's support shimmered through his anxiety, reminding him of the precarious line he was walking, and how much was at stake for both of them. As Maria stepped into the limelight, Robert's heart raced. She transformed under the spotlight, her nerves morphing into fierce determination. The way she held herself, her posture echoing both nervousness and confidence, illuminated her potential to break free from her circumstances. He couldn't help but marvel at how she was bravely confronting the deep-rooted assumptions that dictated their worlds. In that moment, Robert realized it was more than just about one girl. It was a revolution, quietly whispering for change. But would the audience understand? Would they applaud Maria's undeniable talent, or condemn him for fostering an alliance with someone they deemed less than? The thought added weight to his resolve. The stakes felt higher than they had in years. As the first notes filled the auditorium, Robert's focus narrowed to Maria's performance. Each note she sang ripped at the fabric of complacency, weaving a narrative of strength over adversity. Memories of his own struggles merged with hers, fueling his ardor for this moment. As the song drew to a close, the audience erupted with applause. White-knuckled applause that reverberated off the walls like a tidal wave crashing against barriers. Tears blurred Robert's vision. Maria had not only captivated them, but she had also unleashed a raw truth that may have stirred something dormant in the hearts of his peers. Yet the unfamiliar sensation of pride quickly morphed into a pang of fear. What if this sparked a backlash? Would his inaction in the face of potential criticism lead to another cold night spent hiding in his opulence? He turned to Maria, who was grinning widely, basking in her triumph as if the world had finally bowed to her talent. The innocence of her joy washed over him, but it was bittersweet. The thrill of victory mingled with the haunting shadows of prejudice, lurking just beyond their newfound light. As the applause faded, a figure approached, Alex Mercer, one of Robert's most influential investors, a man who took pride in his lofty opinions about social hierarchies. This was the moment of reckoning. Would Alex congratulate Maria, or would he swiftly drag Robert back into the stifling confines of elitism? "You've made quite the impact tonight, Langston," Alex said, his voice dripping with condescension that twisted Robert's gut. "But tell me, what's a billionaire like you doing associating with someone who has the power to inspire and change lives?" Robert interjected, unconsciously stepping between Maria and his businessman friend. The air thickened, suspending the moment as he faced Alex head-on. Maria's eyes widened as she absorbed the confrontation unfolding before her. Robert's heart raced, torn between supporting her and protecting his empire. This was the confrontation he'd feared, and yet it felt strangely liberating. "If you can't see the value in that, then maybe you shouldn't be my investor." Thoughts raced. Had he crossed a line beyond no return? The stakes felt higher, the tension rising like a storm brewing on the horizon. A challenge had been laid bare, initiating a collision of divergent worlds. As Robert stood there, adrenaline coursing through his veins, he felt something within him shift. He had stepped beyond mere altruism. He was battling for each of them. But this moment was just the beginning. What consequences awaited him on both a personal and professional level? In that instant, the future seemed ambiguous, the air thick with unspoken possibilities and looming darkness. Would he embrace this change, or would the nexus of classism tighten its grip once more? As he and Alex stared each other down, the outcome weighed heavily on the next decision at hand. The time had come to face the true cost of standing up for what, and who, he believed in. Robert's pulse quickened as Alex's expression morphed from condescension to irritation. The silence between them swelled, thick with unspoken animosity. The audience, still buzzing from Maria's performance, now sensed the charged tension. With every heartbeat, Robert felt the burden of both his past mistakes and aspirations pressing heavier on his shoulders. "Are you really willing to jeopardize your future over this?" Alex challenged, his voice low, dripping with skepticism. To many, it would seem like a mere disagreement, but it felt like a battle for Robert's very identity. Would he forsake the comfort of wealth and privilege for honesty and integrity? "I'm willing to risk everything for what's right," Robert replied, his voice steadying in the heat of the moment. It was the first time he had spoken with such clarity. The fear that normally paralyzed him burned away, ignited by the possibility of change. The realization crashed over him. He couldn't keep counting on the judgments of others to define his worth or Maria's. The corner of Alex's mouth twitched, almost amused. "That's a noble thought. But this isn't some fairy tale, Robert. People don't change just because you sing a song together." Alex glanced at Maria, then back at Robert. "You know your donors won't tolerate any of this nonsense. They'll see this as a threat." Robert's defenses flared. Social acceptance had never been the ruling factor for him. Recalling Maria's face lit with pride after her performance, he craved more than just admiration. He wanted authenticity. "This isn't about them, Alex. It's about starting a conversation. It's about building something real instead of living behind a facade." His words hung in the air, an undeniable challenge that rattled through the auditorium. Each face in the opulent room began reflecting a mix of curiosity and appraisal. Would they appreciate his audacity, or would the critics cast their judgments? For a moment, Robert resolved to include Maria in the showdown, turning to her. "What do you think?" The question echoed softly, yet the weight of it seemed magnified. He sought her opinion, wanting her to feel like an equal, not just a beneficiary of his kindness. This was a step towards inclusion, not just his life, but hers too. Maria, still processing the exchange, stepped ahead with renewed confidence. "I think it's time we stop hiding behind expectations," she stated. Her voice, somewhat trembling yet filled with direction, resonated through the room. "What do you have to lose by embracing something new?" The words were simple, yet profound. A direct strike into the heart of the only world Robert had known. Alex's face fell momentarily, betraying his discomfort. "You think this will change anything?" It's a naive belief. But Robert discerned something crucial. The seed of potential began to sprout amidst the tension. He thought about the wealthy elite, many of whom had succumbed to relentless competition and superficial validation. Maybe the perceived fragility of Maria's story held more strength than their polished vines of status. "This could fuel a movement," he said, conviction igniting again inside him. "We lead from the front. That is progress." Yet with every step forward, the reality of potential ramifications loomed over them. What would happen if Alex withdrew his support? Would he be forced back into the shadows? Despite the fear gnawing at his resolve, he ignited his ambition to fluctuate with purpose. Stepping onto uncharted territory, after years of playing it safe, felt like emerging from chains. Alex's demeanor hardened. "You're speaking trend, not reality," he warned, folding his arms tightly, a calculated blockade against the sincere momentum blooming around Robert. "You think the world works that way?" The truth remained entangled in Alex's skepticism, and Robert sensed the battle unfolding between them was infinitely larger than one investor's disapproval. This wasn't merely a confrontation, but a crux of values colliding, a visceral test of his resolve. As Robert began to formulate a more profound reaction, bolstered by what Martin had ignited in him and Maria, the landscape ahead shifted. He would have to confront not only Alex, but a broad spectrum of challenges awaiting his newfound resolve. Resolute, he faced Alex, ready to reclaim his narrative without retreat. As the tension hung thick with unspoken challenges, Robert felt the ground shift beneath him. Would they stand firm against the tide, or would the world's expectations pull them back into complacency? The true test awaited. How far was he willing to go to earn his newfound liberation? Robert felt a surge of confidence pulse through him. As he locked eyes with Alex, he realized that this was more than just a dispute over strategy. It was a defining moment. He was at a crossroads where his comfort collided with his core values. Witnessing Maria's resolve only stoked the fire within him. I do believe people can change. They just need a reason to. That stance was uncharacteristic, a pivot away from the passive acceptance that had stained his past. Yet doubt lingered in his mind. Was he ready to venture down this path, risking the security he had always known? The thought of potential isolation gnawed at him, and he briefly turned his gaze away from Alex, seeking assurance in Maria. Her stare was steady, urging him to go on. Are you trying to stand up for some ideal, Robert? Or do you just want to be the hero? Alex's skepticism sliced through the air. Your words may earn applause, but the moment their wallets feel it, you'll see how soft that applause becomes. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Robert's mind. Was this indeed a grandiose play to salvage his self-image? He exhaled slowly, releasing the tension. It's not about being a hero. It's about being genuine. I'm tired of wearing a mask, the audience observed, the hush and audible weight thrust upon the trio. He didn't merely want applause. He craved transformation, both in himself and in the system he had long inhabited. Did the air tremble with possibility? Or was it fraught with consequences he still couldn't comprehend? Robert squared his shoulders, defiance rippling through him. This was the first time he had acknowledged his own vulnerability so publicly. Each breath felt monumental, as though he were shedding another layer of a high society persona that had confined him for years. The challenge he had accepted was one of self-discovery, but also a test of fortitude. Taking a step closer to Alex, he spoke with increased resolve. Step outside your circle for a moment, Alex. You might just learn the world is larger than your parlor tricks. Real change requires that we challenge the status quo, not maintain it. Alex's expression hardened. Doubt shifted to outright disdain. You think a musical number is the key to unraveling centuries of elite control? You really don't grasp how entrenched the system is. Every word Alex uttered sent a ripple of fear and excitement racing through Robert. The prospect of revolutionizing not just his path, but that of others felt dangerously ambitious. Maybe Alex was right. Real change was fraught with challenges that would push him to his limits. The reality of repercussions loomed like a storm cloud, but if he chose to make this stand, he would encounter those consequences either way. Glancing back at Maria, he registered her optimism, a quiet strength radiating from her. It validated his journey. It was a reminder that even the smallest voice could provoke the loudest change. So what if it is naive? He shot back. Wouldn't you rather be naive and hopeful than accepting the darkness we already know? Their escalating confrontation had drawn the attention of the audience, excitement mingling with tension as each listener grappled with their own interpretations of Robert's evolution. Would they distance themselves from the audacity of rebellion, or would they find solidarity in an unexpected alliance? The palpable tension shifted. Something significant was unfolding. Robert took a moment to take it all in. The fear, the exhilaration, and the unseen costs of this confrontation. The walls he had built began to crack, revealing a path forward, albeit precarious. His growth was contingent on this very moment. He realized he could inspire, but only if he acted authentically in the face of resistance. Yet in the midst of this awakening, what remained unexamined was just how far he truly was willing to go. As the audience grappled with their shifting perceptions, Robert sensed the weight of the future bearing down on him, essential decisions looming ahead. The stakes were rising, and with a profound sense of urgency, the time had come to face his demons beyond just Alex, confronting the system that had championed the fear he was seeking to escape. What awaited him on the other side of this decision? Robert stood at the edge of an invisible chasm, staring into the void of uncertainty. The adrenaline from the confrontation still coursed through his veins, and as he scanned the audience, Reality sharpened in his mind. Every gaze fixated on him, hungry for resolution or validation. The faint whisper of doubt echoed in his thoughts. Was this moment his authentic self emerging, or merely a staged performance designed to impress? He felt the heat of the spotlight intensify, forcing him to confront the truth of his own motivations. What exactly was at stake in pushing against Alex's taunts? He was acutely aware that taking this stance could take him deeper into realms of his past he had long sought to escape. Would the people who had once supported him see him as a traitor to the ideals they cherished? Or would they view him as a beacon of hope, a catalyst for a change they hadn't dared to imagine? The uncertainty compounded his resolve. Each second that passed became a mini dilemma. He could walk away, retreat into the comforting shadows of his old self, or he could leap forward, embracing whatever consequences may come. It was a formative moment. He needed to find clarity, or risk conflating his earlier bravado with a reality that might not hold. Taking a deep breath, Robert refocused on Maria. Her unwavering support ignited a spark within him, and he recalled her unyielding belief in potential for change. He admired her courage, which had grown from the fragility of her circumstances. In that instant, he realized that what he truly craved was authenticity, not just for himself, but for the people caught in the web of the very system he challenged. Risk rested on an ambiguous precipice, but for the first time, he felt ready to roll the dice. "Alex," he said, voice firm yet inviting. "Yes, the system is entrenched. But isn't that all the more reason to challenge it? It's our very inaction that allows it to persist. The more I think about it, the clearer it becomes. We're not just fighting on a stage. We need purpose behind our actions." The crowd reacted, surprise giving way to curiosity. Robert's challenge to Alex felt different, less like a personal vendetta, and more like an awakening of collective accountability. "Perhaps it's time to put our money where our mouths are," he continued, steeling himself against Alex's sneered disapproval. "If we are not willing to invest ourselves in this cause, then we are dooming it before it ever takes flight." His words, though brave, intimidated Robert. He could feel the weight of expectations shifting. Some were ready to embrace change, while others positioned themselves against it, firmly tethered to complacency. He could almost taste the tension in the air, the unknown that awaited beyond this confrontation. Moments passed, stretching into what felt like an eternity. A critical component surged through him like electricity. He had the power not only to ignite a passion for change, but to galvanize others into action. He caught Maria's eyes again, and the brief smile she offered him felt like a lifeline, a confirmation of his choice. Inspired by her belief, he was emboldened to draw connections between their experiences. But then, doubt crept back in with insistence. Was this impulsive declaration merely a puzzle piece of an even grander plan that existed outside his comprehension? After all, in their world of elite control, the stakes were immeasurable, and navigating them would require strategic finesse. How could he bridge his artistry with systemic change, while facing those who sought to silence any such discourse? Robert inhaled deeply, steeling himself to commit to this path. What had begun as a quest for personal transformation awakened a deep-rooted desire for systemic upheaval. Yet, unknown challenges lay ahead. Could he galvanize support? Or would forces beyond his control shatter any burgeoning hopes for change? As he surveyed the audience once more, understanding dawned. He was no longer addressing just individuals. He was calling forth an awakening. He sensed a ripple of potential shift, but still, shadows loomed. The questions remained. Was this the time to voice those truths, or would doing so open wounds deeper than any could anticipate? The stakes escalated as Robert prepared to speak again. His heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the promise of forging a path through the darkness. Meanwhile, Alex's gaze bore into him, calculating. What strategies lurked behind the veneer of indifference? What had he underestimated in the delicate balance of power? With his breath caught in anticipation, Robert's voice rang out again, destined to change everything. The air was thick with tension as Robert stood there, conscious of every heartbeat and the eyes that scrutinized him. He had tipped the scales. Now he needed to hold his ground. In that moment, crystallized in the spotlight's glow, he felt like the protagonist of his own story, surrounded by a cast that shifted and morphed with their unspoken beliefs and unvoiced concerns. "What we need isn't more talk." Robert's voice was sharp, slicing through the electric silence. "We need action. Real, tangible action." The cadence of his words, once carefully choreographed, now flowed more organically. Each syllable carried with it echoes of his own fate and reluctance to fall into complacency. He felt the embers of inspiration kindling into flames, drawing strength from both the uncertain feedback of the crowd and the fierce glare of Alex. He felt liberated and terrified in equal measure. A flicker of humanity glimmered in some eyes, while others remained steely and steadfast in their disbelief. Robert was acutely aware of the multitude of narratives unfolding, not just about him, but about everyone in attendance. He was a vessel of their hopes, fears, and aspirations, and with that realization came a heavy responsibility. "Alex," he said, taking a step forward, punctuating his words with a new level of determination. "You think this is just about me? It's about all of us who've been told to play by rules that don't serve our well-being. Fighting against the tide means getting wet, but isn't it better than standing still and being swept away?" The challenge in his tone amplified the weight of the confrontation. He could feel the subtle shift in the air, the audience drawn deeper into the narrative as if waiting for the inevitable climax of a dramatic opera. Yet, within Robert began to unfold another layer of conflict, a burgeoning doubt that perhaps his plea would prompt fierce disagreement rather than support. What if the very framework he sought to challenge only retaliated harder? The fear of alienating those he already knew brewed under the surface as his bravado surged forward. This was more than a reaction to Alex's extremism. It was a full-fledged confrontation with the internal divisions within himself. Robert took a deep breath, drawing on Maria's unwavering presence. Her silent encouragement provided him with unexpected stamina. He had begun to see his predicament in a new light, not as a solitary struggle, but a challenge that required collective resolve. Striding through the crowd, he could feel the juxtaposition between the warmth of shared energy and the chill of isolation. "Here's the truth," he said, the sincerity in his voice punctuating the air. "I've lost too much time pretending to fit into a mold that doesn't reflect who I am. The question that remains is, what will you choose? Will we sit on the sidelines, quietly watching the world we know crumble around us? Or will we unite to fuel a change that matters?" The weight of his own words rushed over him. In that moment, as he poured out his heart, he was realizing something profound. His journey wasn't just about him. It was about every soul grappling with the climax of life's infinite contradictions. Yet, the tighter he grasped the significance of his actions, the more aware he became of the inevitable consequences to follow. Should he continue to push against the current? Was he prepared for the resistance that would undoubtedly rise? His gaze flicked back to Alex, catching the disdain etched on that familiar face. Whatever Alex had planned in retaliation, Robert now faced it head-on. He wasn't just standing for himself any longer. He was ready to fight for a vision larger than any individual could encapsulate alone. But lurking beneath the surface of empowerment was a question he could not shake. Had he miscalculated the momentum he'd begun to build? Would he find allies, or he would become another voice shouting into the void? As the crowd held its breath, waiting for the next revelation, Robert felt the floor shift beneath him. He realized this intricate dance of power and desire could thrust him into something monumental, or destroy him entirely. With this looming uncertainty, Robert braced himself for the next step. The moment had come to truly grapple with the forces at play, to balance the scales of ambition and fear. The real battle, it seemed, was only just beginning. What would he uncover about himself, and would he emerge stronger or shattered? And as Alex stepped forward, poised to respond, the anticipation echoed in Robert's mind. This confrontation could redefine everything. As the uncertainty hung in the air, Robert felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a vice. He had delivered a call to action, yet the very ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble in response. He was acutely aware of the lives intertwined with his words. They all bore a stake in the outcome. Who was he to risk their trust and hopes when he himself felt unmoored? Alex stepped forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, Robert, really? You think you can rally these people with empty phrases? They won't follow a leader who has no idea where he's going." His words sliced through the silence, carrying an edge that ignited a new wave of tension. Robert felt a rush of blood to his cheeks, a reaction born from defensive indignation. Did Alex truly believe he could unravel the fragile thread he had begun to weave? The challenge propelled him into a deeper resolve. "You're wrong, Alex. Leadership isn't about knowing every step. It's about envisioning a direction. I may not have all the answers, but I have something you'll never understand. Authenticity." The crowd shifted, taking on a life of its own as whispers circulated. Robert could tell by their curious faces that his words resonated. The energy was electric. He had suddenly ventured beyond the precipice of mere words into the realm of conviction. Still, in the back of his mind, shadows loomed. What if he was merely deluding himself? As Alex opened his mouth to retort, Robert seized the moment, realizing he could turn this confrontation into an opportunity for deeper introspection, about himself, about Alex, and about everyone present. "Alex, if this is a battle you want to wage, let's not do it out of personal pettiness, but out of a shared desire to create something right." He sensed the crowd's pivoting interest, catching glimmers of hope that illuminated dimly within them. "We've all faced the pressures of this world. Which one of us hasn't felt the weight of expectations? But isn't it time we dare to explore pathways less traveled?" Robert felt adrenaline surging. He needed to break through, resonating with what he now recognized as his hidden talent. An ability to articulate not just his own struggles, but to illuminate the hidden fears of others. "People never forget the connections they forge," he continued, locking eyes with individuals as he spoke. "We may stand on different sides of this divide, but our fears echo each other. I don't wish to lead them to an uncertain fate if you don't wish to follow." Alex's expression faltered momentarily, leaving Robert with a comforting thought. Perhaps vulnerability was more powerful than he had realized. And as the crowd shifted again, balance teetering precariously on the edge of encouragement versus skepticism, Robert found an unexpected determination within. Each nervous glance from the audience echoed his own trepidation, every nod indicating an unspoken agreement to confront their collective fears. "Will you permit me to stand here with all of you?" he asked, his tone softening mid-sentence as he let the reality set in. "Let's not allow ourselves to be driven apart by conflict. Instead, let's confront our situation together because I too am afraid. But I believe in what we might achieve." The challenge posed by Alex hung in the air, yet Robert was committed, no matter how unsettled he felt. This was not merely a wrestling match of wits, but a chance for personal growth. The collective tapestry of human experience was in the making. The intensity in the atmosphere thickened, culminating into a charged silence. As Robert stood amidst both allies and adversaries, he felt a sprinkle of clarity. This moment could push him over the brink into something transformative. The rich terrain of the unknown beckoned, nothing like he had ever imagined. Then, just when he thought he was starting to gain momentum, a voice from the back shouted, "What would you actually do, Robert? Words only go so far." The challenge reverberated in his mind. This was the moment where he would either find his footing or sink beneath the weight of expectations. What would he reveal about his true intentions? Would he step into the fray, or cling to the safety of the sidelines? With clarity dawning on him like sunlight breaking through the clouds, Robert took a deep breath. The path ahead loomed large, but it was clear. The next step would define not only his destiny, but also the fates of countless others waiting tentatively in the shadows. Robert's mind raced as the question hung heavily in the air, a stark challenge that threatened to undermine the fragile momentum he had begun to cultivate. Who was he in this moment, and what did he truly stand for? Words alone would not bridge the gap between aspiration and action. Action, he murmured under his breath, grasping for the meaning of the word, as if it could offer him clarity. The cacophony of voices faded momentarily, replaced by the sudden clarity that surged forth. He could feel the collective gaze of the onlookers penetrating him, dissecting his resolve. Discomfort coiled in the pit of his stomach. He was an imposter standing before those who sought real guidance. But then, an idea sparked in his mind, a vision far more powerful than the fear swirling around him. Each of us is defined not by what we say, but what we do, he finally proclaimed, his voice gaining strength as he pushed against the tide of doubt. I won't ask you to follow words. I'll invite you to follow a challenge, one that demands our hands and hearts be ready to work alongside one another. It's time to take risks that matter, to venture beyond our comfort zones. The tension in the room shifted again, the air tinged with anticipation. He could see flickers of curiosity dance across faces that had once been skeptical. This was the moment. He dared to crack open the door to transformation, both for himself and his audience. I don't have a detailed plan. What I have is a willingness to experiment and learn from what unfolds. Starting tomorrow, I will be here, in our community, taking on projects that matter to us. I'll begin by revitalizing the park where we played as kids, an opportunity to reconnect to our roots, our shared humanity. Who will join me? The murmurs transformed into a hum, teetering on the precipice of choice. Some faces lit with excitement, while others reflected uncertainty and skepticism. Yet Robert felt invigorated. There was power in offering an authentic invitation for collective effort, rooted in a common cause. His gaze locked onto Alex, who stood immobilized by surprise. Robert could sense the shift in dynamics. The criticism hurled by Alex had not crippled him, but had become the catalyst for meaningful action. For the first time, he recognized Alex not merely as an adversary, but as a fellow human, wrestling with his own vulnerabilities. What about you, Alex? Robert challenged, his voice steady but inviting. Will you stand idly by, or will you take the risk to join us and redefine what leadership looks like? The question reverberated through the crowd, weaving a new narrative. Even the participants consumed by doubt began to ponder what their involvement might signify. Conversations sparked, and a sense of purpose began to pulse through the group. Yet Robert was acutely conscious of the fragility of this moment. The stakes were high, and he felt a weight pressing on his shoulders, the type of burden that accompanies immense responsibility. Would he be able to nurture this energy, transforming it into a movement of genuine change? As the crowd pondered his challenge, uncertainty gripped him anew. What if the very actions he proposed could serve to expose his inadequacies further? What if the response to his call remained muted, leaving him standing alone amidst his unfulfilled aspirations? Still, was that a gamble he was willing to take? He believed deep down that he had struck a chord of honesty and vulnerability, that he had tapped into something visceral that surpassed mere words. This was not just about speaking. It was about becoming. The sound of footsteps approached, and Robert turned to find an older woman from the community standing before him. I'm in, she declared boldly, a smile breaking through the uncertainty etched in her features. I believe we can do this together. As others began to nod in agreement, a renewed sense of agency flourished in Robert's chest. Together, they could overcome their fears and transform the despair into empowerment. This was an unfamiliar territory, both terrifying and exhilarating. And just as he began to entertain thoughts of what lay ahead, a transformed park, the laughter of children, a community united, he heard Alex scoff lightly. A noble effort, but let's see how long this really lasts. The defiance struck Robert like a match igniting dry timber, and he felt that restless spark return. He turned his focus inward, ready to embrace whatever newfound challenges lay ahead, shrouded in the looming uncertainty. The question swirling in his mind felt familiar now. After nurturing this momentum, how would he ensure it evolved and didn't sputter out? The idea of action was just the beginning, the first brushstroke on a larger canvas awaiting his exploration. Robert inhaled deeply, and a whisper emerged as he vowed to himself, "The time must come to face down fear and establish purpose. I will not let myself be defined by doubt. I will seize this moment." And as that determination crystallized, he felt time stretch before him, an expanse filled with potential and the burden of expectation. What lay ahead would either solidify his place as a leader or leave him clinging to the remnants of his ambition. Choices loomed, challenging him to rise or to shrink away once again. The journey was far from over. It was time to turn intentions into tangible action. With each step, he would unearth the leader he longed to be. Would they stand together, or would he face this challenge alone? The next morning arrived, and the sun peeked over the horizon like a shy performer making its entrance. Robert felt a surge of anticipation as he prepared for the day ahead. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt and squaring his shoulders. Today marked the first real step toward his vision, the moment when words would transform into something substantial. Yet, beneath that layer of excitement, anxiety simmered, urging him to reflect on what he was truly capable of achieving. After a quick breakfast, he set out toward the park, the familiar route charged with uncertainty. Each step echoed with the weight of expectation. What if no one showed up? What if the task proved too daunting? He dismissed the voices in his mind, mentally affirming the commitment he had made the day before. This was not merely about the park. It was about proving to himself that he could spark real change. When he arrived at the park, Robert was greeted by an array of faces, some beaming with enthusiasm, others shrouded in apprehension, unsure of what to expect. The older woman who had pledged her support, Mrs. Gilmore, was there early, armed with gardening tools and a wide-brimmed hat. "Good to see you, Robert. Are you ready to get our hands dirty?" Her words anchored him, grounding the swirling uncertainty. "Absolutely," he replied, feeling gratitude swell within him. They gathered in a circle, and Robert recognized his responsibility to instill a sense of common purpose. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you might be feeling hesitant, but I assure you, we're on the brink of something meaningful here. Let's talk about what we can achieve together." As he spoke, Robert could sense the shifting dynamics of the group. Each nod, each simple interaction created threads of connection, weaving a more intricate fabric of shared intentions. However, his thoughts occasionally drifted to Alex. Robert couldn't shake the feeling that skepticism lingered like a dark cloud on the fringes of their optimism. He resolved to confront that negativity, both within himself and from others. "Today we won't just clean up the park. We'll talk about our ideas, share our experiences, and maybe even challenge each other. Let's see what we can bring to life." The group dispersed, and the air pulsed with energy. As they divided into teams, Robert took a moment to walk around, engaging with individuals, gathering thoughts on the park's future. Each conversation revealed hidden talents he hadn't envisioned: artistic flair, strategic planning, and even an environmental scientist among them. Still, a tightening knot of doubt lurked in his chest. Gripping his shovel a little tighter, he forced himself to confront the unease. What if he was leading them into uncharted territory without a map? Just as he wrestled with these fears, he closed his eyes and focused on the sounds around him. Laughter, the rustle of leaves, children playing in the distance. Purpose emerged from that tumult, urging him onward. Hours passed as they worked, transforming the park little by little. However, as dusk approached, Robert began to feel exhaustion creeping in. The work had connected them, yet he sensed that the initial enthusiasm was waning. Skepticism resurfaced like an unwelcome guest. He needed to stay vigilant, to keep the momentum growing rather than allowing it to stall. Just then, Alex arrived, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. "Fancy seeing you here, Robert," he drawled, feigning indifference. "Looks like all this talk hasn't turned into anything grand after all." The challenge in Alex's voice struck him like an arrow. This was the confrontation Robert had anticipated, the moment where he could either withdraw into himself or step forward as a leader. The choice had never been clearer. "Maybe it's not about grand gestures, Alex. It's the little steps that build a foundation. Today is just the beginning," he replied, mirroring Alex's intensity. "Are you willing to help rather than critique, or will you stand there and watch?" The air thickened between them, tension crackling like electricity, and Robert felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. He understood that this moment could serve as a pivotal turning point in not just his journey, but in his interactions with others, especially with Alex. Would he confront that fear and embrace the opportunity to redefine leadership and himself through vulnerability? As Robert leaned into this challenge, threading his resolve with clarity, he felt the timbre of his own promise reverberate in his chest. It was time to elevate the dialogue. Tomorrow would test him further. What would Alex choose? Would confrontation yield growth, or fracture their budding resolve? The potential for transformation loomed as daunting as it was exhilarating. The following morning, a crisp autumn sun bathed the park in golden light. Robert Langston surveyed the scene before him, feeling a strange mixture of pride and anxiety. The park, once a lifeless expanse of neglect, was buzzing with energy. Community members of all ages had joined him, armed with gardening tools and bright smiles, ready to collaborate and reclaim this space. Weeks of hesitation washed away as he watched them mold the park into something beautiful. Together they pulled weeds, planted flowers, and painted benches. The laughter of children echoed, and for Robert, each interaction reinforced a profound realization. When given a chance, people were eager to help ignite change. This wasn't about him commanding authority. It was about fostering an environment where collaboration could thrive. As the sun rose higher, Robert approached Mrs. Gilmore, who was carefully planting flowers. "This looks fantastic," he said, watching her hands work steadily in the soil. "It's beautiful, Robert," she replied, looking up with a genuine smile. "But what you've done is far more than just emotional support. You have brought us together, reminded us of the importance of community." Her words rang with truth, ringing in his ears long after the conversation had ended. He sculpted a vision for the future, one where the park could serve as a hub of gathering and creativity, where stories were shared and every voice mattered. But that day, as he stood in the middle of it all, he felt an unsettling tension hovering. Alex Mercer had not yet made an appearance. Would he still dismiss Robert's efforts as trivial? When midday approached, there was a sudden rustling in the crowd. Robert turned to see Alex walking toward them, his demeanor uncharacteristically serious. Speculation stirred among the crowd, but Robert held his ground. This was a critical moment. Would he cower under scrutiny or stand firm in his convictions? "Good to see you here, Robert," Alex began, scanning the unfolding scene. "I must say, I didn't expect you to mobilize a bunch of people," Robert retorted, cutting him off. "I wouldn't call them a bunch. These are individuals empowering each other to create something meaningful. Your judgment doesn't define us." A ripple went through the crowd. They held their breath. Would their leader hold his ground, or crumble beneath the pressure? Alex's expression narrowed, but Robert could feel the room shift as newfound confidence surged through him. This was a chance to demonstrate the full weight of his resolve. "I started this initiative because I believe change happens when we convey our strengths collectively. We're tired of remaining silent, shaking our heads in agreement while we live in stagnation." "Don't you understand," Alex shot back, "that this has no sustainability? This movement, whatever you want to call it, will fizzle out. You'll lose credibility." "What's credibility worth if our hearts aren't engaged?" Robert challenged, his voice unwavering. I would rather lead a heartfelt project with genuine connections than follow the hollow ideals of elitism. He could see several faces in the crowd nodding in agreement, a glimmer of excitement igniting in their eyes as they responded to Robert's resilience. For the first time, he felt in control, not just of his own fears, but of the narrative that surrounded them both. "Let's turn your skepticism into action," Robert invited Alex, shifting the focus of their confrontation. "Come join us rather than critique from the sidelines. Show us what you can do to make this a thriving space." For a moment, time stood still. Alex blinked, clearly taken aback by Robert's challenge. Then, as if gathering his defenses, Alex half smirked. "I don't do manual labor, Robert. I'm here for class and strategy. That's my expertise." The crowd shifted, the excitement dissipating for a moment. But Robert refused to back down. Expertise can only run so deep without heart. If you believe subsequent generations depend on uplifts, real strategies must include the voices of all, rather than the privilege of a few. "Don't you think this is worth your time?" Something shifted in Alex's demeanor, the glint of recognition that perhaps Robert's fire was taking root. The challenge hung in the air like a live wire, strumming tensions higher. Robert stepped closer, feeling the gravity of the moment. "I'll strive to build something lasting here, and I'll do it with or without your support. The better question is, what will you decide?" With that, Robert turned to his community, eyes gleaming with hope, determination hardening each resolve he carried. "Would you join me in laughing at the skeptics? In dismantling the walls that restrict progress?" The crowd erupted in spirited applause, voices calling out in agreement. Robert could feel the swell of support lifting him, providing a sturdy foundation for the words he had spoken. And for Alex, the tension between them shifted. The stakes looked different now. "All right," Alex conceded, holding up a hand in mock surrender. "I suppose I can lend a hand. For a bit." The crowd erupted again as laughter rippled through the audience, an unspoken understanding solidifying their unity. With this unexpected development, Robert's heart swelled with gratitude. He had not only confronted Alex, but had emerged from the ashes of doubt as an authentic leader, one whose actions spoke more than hollow words ever could. As the day concluded, Robert looked over the park, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. They had tackled their first community project together, a symbol of resurgence and unity where despair once resided. But it was just the beginning. The transformation had just begun, not merely for the park, but for Robert himself. He had proven to himself and others that striving for change required vulnerability, unwavering courage, and community engagement. As they gathered to celebrate their efforts, he shared his vision of future initiatives to further beautify their community, to perpetuate this newfound spirit of collaboration. The audience erupted in enthusiasm, no longer passive observers but active participants in sculpting their narrative. At last, Robert understood. He was no longer a billionaire hiding behind wealth and privilege. He was Robert Langston, a man inspired and transformed by a community of resilience, leading not from fear of loss, but from an unwavering hope for renewal. The shadows of doubt faded into the past. Together, they could rewrite anything, rebuild everything. The world beyond them awaited. In that moment, Robert felt invigorated, ready to embrace this new reality and everything it could bring. The journey lay open before them, and all that remained was the will to gather as one. If you felt the impact of Robert's journey, it's time to act. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss another exclusive emotional story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread inspiration like wildfire. I want to hear your reactions. Comment down below what you think about Robert's transformation and share your hopes for the future. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion.